Hello and welcome to another episode of Geography Made Easy. In these videos, we try to make difficult topics easy. So today we will be discussing UPSC optional geography, and the topic for today is heat and soil budgets. This is a part of the oceanography subtopic. So firstly, we'll move on to the main part of the discussion, that is, what is the meaning of the word heat budget? So heat budget, we study about heat budget when we are studying climatology, which is a balance between the incoming solar radiation and the outgoing solar radiation in the Earth's atmosphere. So just like in any budget where we have an income and an expenditure, here we have a incoming solar radiation and an outgoing solar radiation in this case. The percentage of the heat which is received by the earth is usually considered as 100% at the top of the atmosphere, and then it is spread or it is dissipated around a number of other different kinds of elements within the atmosphere, within the other features, and this is how the budget is then calculated. Coming directly into the heat budget of the oceans, so it is a balance between the incoming and the outgoing heat in the ocean system. And we first have to mention here is that the ocean system, the main heat energy which is received by the ocean is from the sun or solar energy. So here we are calculating the shortwave radiations which is received from the sun, just like in case of earth, also the long wave radiations, which is also while the water is cooling, it is radiated out, just like when the earth is cooling, when the land surface is cooling, in a similar fashion. Along with that, we have the heat fluxes or the different kinds of heat energy which can all of a sudden be dissipated when the water is trying to cool. So latent or hidden heat fluxes, sensible heat fluxes. So all these energy types, we know that they are there. We have the latent heat, we have the sensible heat, the heat which comes out during cooling, and heat transfer by ocean currents. And we can see here is the diagram which shows how heat transfer is taking place. We know there are two types of currents in the earth. One is the warm current and the other is the cold current. When we are going towards the polar regions, when the atmosphere becomes cooler, the water also significantly becomes colder, and we have the cold currents originating from the parts of the earth where we know it is becoming colder. On the other hand, around the equatorial region, we have all the warm currents originating. So these currents, they help in balancing the heat which is received by the surface of the earth, which is received in this case by the ocean. So how much heat the ocean absorbs and releases is what is calculated in the heat budget. So a heat budget, it is I have named it as a fine balance in between. It is a balance between the atmospheric systems as well as the oceanic system as well as the land systems. So there is a huge amount of heat which is stored in the ocean, and it is called the oceanic heat content or OHC. And some of the main sources of oceanic heat content is, of course, the major is sunlight, because we know that the sun here is playing a very important role in giving heat to the surface of the earth. Apart from that, we have other also other things which also give heat to the oceans, which can be greenhouse gases, which can be clouds, water vapor, which also helps put in heat energy into the ocean. Apart from that, the heat constantly gets mixed. Otherwise, it would have been homogeneous. We would have had very hot seas, very extremely hot seas near the equator, and very cold seas near the poles. But this doesn't happen because life would not have survived if there were not an intermingling or exchange of hot and cold to regulate the earth. So, Earth's regulatory mechanism plays a very important role. And we have the tides, waves, and currents. So these three things which help move heat from warmer to cooler latitudes, and from shallow levels to deeper levels, because we know that when the water becomes cold, it sinks. So cold water will always travel in a deeper, so a cold current will travel below or in a deeper part of the ocean than a warm current which will be on the surface. And so there is both vertical mixing of water, so we have vertical mixing of water, as well as we have horizontal transfer of heat energy. Let us move on. So what are the processes that are involved in the heating of the ocean? Here I have just listed down the main processes. One is the absorption of radiation from the sun. So the radiant energy which is coming from the sun to the earth, it is getting absorbed by the process of radiation by the oceans. Then we have convection current, through which from the ocean bottom, which so the heat which is so inside the earth, we know that we have molten lava and gases, and this heat also the bottom, ocean bottom becomes, is some in certain places where there are fissures, cracks, we see that the ocean bottom is hotter. So in that case we see convection currents can, start occurring if there is a hot surface. And this is the experiment we have all studied in school, where we have, if we have a candle and if we have a beaker of water, we will see that how the, and if we put in potassium permanganate into the water, we can actually see or be able to trace the convection current. So the initially the water molecules near the bottom, it becomes hot, then it starts rising, and then it cools, and then again it sinks back. So in this way we see these motions which start occurring, and these are called convection currents throughout the earth's atmosphere, as well as even in the oceans. We see these convection currents take place, and they help in balancing the heat between the surface of the ocean and the interior of the ocean. Then we have transformation of kinetic energy to heat. So if there is any body which is in motion, that heat can get transferred, the kinetic energy can get stored in the form of heat energy by heating the water molecules. Heating due to chemical processes, rare, but it can happen, that there is rocks which are having a particular chemical reaction, and they are, when they come in contact with water, there is chemical reaction, and that can lead to heat release, and we can have this is also can be one reason for heating. Convection of sensible heat from the atmosphere. So the atmospheric system as well as the water system, the ocean system, they work very close to one another. And so when the water, so the heat from the atmosphere can get convected, so into the oceanic system from the atmosphere, so that the atmosphere becomes cooler. And condensation of water vapor. So convection, conduction, radiation are all the three processes are helping in the heating of the atmosphere. But out of this, radiation is most important. Moving on. So what are the processes of cooling? We can see that there are less processes of cooling. So one is the back radiation. So we have the ocean and the radiation back, which is sent back. So the hot surface of the sea, it is radiating back the heat energy into the atmosphere, that can lead to cooling. Again we have convection of sensible heat to the atmosphere. So in the previous case we saw that the sensible heat was being received by the water from the atmosphere. Here it is released into the atmosphere so that the sea can become cooler. And of course evaporation. So evaporation is an important process by which cooling is taking place, that is the water is getting converted into water vapor by heat, and during this water vapor, when the conversion takes place from water to water vapor, a large amount of heat is released in this case into the atmosphere, and the water surface becomes cooler. So this is the way, by the mechanism by which evaporation takes place. And this is somehow again something very similar to the sensible heat portion which we have discussed. So what is the importance? Why are we studying this particular chapter? So this particular heat budget right now has a huge impact on climate change. So it is a climate change indicator, and we will look at a few of the current certain current news which have come out. So the heat budget, which is getting the oceanic heat budget, which is getting a kind of, it is not in a very proper manner. It is not operating in a proper manner. The surface of the oceans are becoming hotter day by day. This is an indicator that there is climate change. I'll give you an example here. We have the Bay of Bengal, and we know that the Bay of Bengal is where. So if we have India, this is where my Bay of Bengal is. This ocean is a shallow ocean compared to Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea is deeper. The basin is shallower. A large amount of rivers are flowing into this particular sea with a huge amount of load. Now, we also know that this coastal area, the eastern part, right from Bangladesh to West Bengal, Orissa, then Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu, all of this area is affected by tropical cyclones. And every year we have tropical cyclones occurring during the months of April, May, or August, September, October onwards. The number of these tropical cyclones have increased, and every year we are seeing that there are the number is much more than it was, say, 20, 30, or 40 years ago. Now, this is because recently it has been seen that the temperatures of Bay of Bengal has increased, and one of the reasons why the tropical cyclone gets formed, is that there has to be a shallow sea, and there has to be a shallow sea where the temperature can go up. The water level is less, so the temperature increases faster. So this is one of the reasons why we have to study and understand about heat budget. So that is one. The next is sea level rise, a heat budget. So it is becoming warmer, the sea level will rise more. Of course, it is an indicator of climate change again. Impact on weather pattern. I discussed this right now about the example of this cyclone in the Bay of Bengals. And we have ecosystem impact, very important. The different plants and animals which live in the ocean, so the flora and the fauna, they are, in many cases we can see that they are not being able to tolerate the change in the heat. So maybe in certain places there is too much hot water which is coming in, killing a lot of organisms living there, or it is becoming cooler or colder. So climate change just does not indicate global warming, rather it's an umbrella term. And here we are looking at particular parts of the earth which might be experiencing extremes of temperature, which can be very hot or very cold, and it can also indicate that there can be extreme weather incidents like cyclones, tornadoes, etc. So these things impact the ecosystem very badly. The plants and animals are used to living in a certain kind of environment, but that environment is getting destroyed in this case, and yes, it is a problem. The last point is not so important, but the changes in the inertia of water bodies, the way in which it is flowing, the flow patterns, they can also change due to a change in the temperature. So thermal inertia will mean that how the water body, the sea or the ocean, how its movement is getting affected. And in the long term and in the larger picture, even this will have a huge impact on the climate change. So climate change is something which we can link with this heat budget. Let us look at the two news I found very recently. So one is has been published in India Today, where we can see they are saying that ocean currents are shifting. Study finds coral could become a thing of the past. So ocean currents thinking indicates that there is a change in the heat budget of the ocean. The heat budget is changing, and corals which live in warm seas might not find a suitable temperature. It might become very hot. So they might just die. And on our right hand side, we have hurricanes, heat waves, and rising seas, the impacts of record ocean heat. This was published 1 day ago and in the BBC. So again, and there are many more news. If you Google, you will be able to see so much more news. And we have to, when we are talking about this in our answer, we need to incorporate this part very much. Now let's come to the salt budget. So what is the salt budget? And here we have discussed about the salinity of the ocean in my previous video. So salt budget refers to a balance of the salt on the Earth's ocean. And again, when we are talking of a budget, that means the salt which is added into the ocean water and the salt which is leaving the ocean water. And salt is added, we know, into the ocean water from land. So basically we have the seas, the rivers, the different rivers bringing in dissolved minerals which are getting added into the ocean, as well as if there are rocks in the ocean bottom, even the rocks which contain salt, they get dissolved and we have salt getting added on in the sea or the ocean. And how do we lose salt? Salt losses can be seen through one of the processes, evaporation. If we have salty water and if the water is evaporated, the salt is left behind as a precipitate. So these are some of the ways by which we can have a gain and loss of salt. And this budget, this particular gain and loss, when it is calculated, we will get the budget, salt budget. Salt is derived. Now we have talked about from where salt is derived. It is derived from the lithospheric rocks and in certain cases ocean bottom dissolution of rocks. Salt is lost from the ocean through evaporation, ice formation and transport of salt through ocean currents. So it is added through river streams and it is lost through evaporation. And if the water is, if there is ice formed from salt water, then the salt water gets frozen and we see that some amount of salt can be lost from the, so the salt will not add and become the ice, rather the salt will again precipitate during the process of ice formation. So we see that the Antarctica, the ice, which is of course ice, a lot of the ice we see is shelf ice, which is seawater which has just frozen. Also in Arctic we see the same, but that ice is not salty, rather the salt has been precipitated, it is left behind, it gets back into the sea. And so that is also one way by which we can have salt losses. And through ocean currents we see that salt can get transported from one part of the ocean to the other, changing the saltiness of that particular sea or ocean. Now, why again we are talking about the salt budget, and in details we have talked about the heat budget, and so I'll just explain here that salt budget has a huge impact, or rather salt budget is a huge indicator of climate crisis or climate change. Now we have to understand that climate change is one of the major problems which our Earth, our planet is experiencing. So to understand climate crisis, we have to study salinity. And this is one paper which has been published by the Oxford academic journals, where the salinity threats, the researchers have recognized salinity threats and connected them with the climate crisis. So increase in the salinity or a decrease in the salinity can have a huge impact on the climate, and they can act as indicators to tell us whether the harm is done, whether it is reversible or irreversible. Another important impact of a change in the balance of the salt budget is the impact on ecosystems, and especially marine ecosystems. Every animal in the ocean or the sea is used to living in a particular kind of ecosystem, and this ecosystem is very much adjusted. A slight increase in any parameter of the water can actually affect the ecosystem, and we can see large scale extinction of a lot of plants and animals. So ecosystems with an increase in salinity, which is happening because of global warming with more evaporation taking place, we can actually experience a shift in the ecosystems. A lot of plants are dying, animals are dying in the ocean, and this is a major problem. So again, I will give you one example, and this happened in the little run of Kutch. This little run of Kutch is in Gujarat. So this is a protected area, and this has the very unique wild endemic species, which is the wild ass, Indian wild ass, which is not seen in any other part of the world. Now, in little run of Kutch, we see that there were people, tribals, who were making salt. So this is actually a natural salt pan, and because of the salt pan, a unique ecosystem has developed, out of which one of the animals is the Indian wild ass. Apart from that, there are many different species of plants, certain smaller other animals, and a huge variety of birds. And a lot of migratory birds, they prefer to come and stay here, stay in the little run. It is a very fragile ecosystem. So the salt, the tribals who make the salt, they were exploiting these particular salt pans. Now with time we know that there has been encroachment, and the space, the salt pan has of course shrunk. Now of course with that, the people here are also in a vulnerable situation. They encroach more and more into the core area of this particular ecosystem, and they create or make salt. Now, this was leading to a negative impact on the biodiversity of this particular fragile ecosystem, and so it was banned. So, salt making can have a negative impact on the ecosystem as well. So, it can tamper with the salt budgets which is there inland or in the ocean. So now the people are employed. The government has actually, since they have banned it, they have also provided rehabilitation to these people who are doing other things apart from and not making salt. And we also have another news which has come up this year is a El Nino year, and we and the NASA, from their satellite imageries, they have predicted that there will be a change in the saltiness of coastal water because of El Nino impacts. So the salt budget will get impacted. Now this year the El Nino impact was quite there was a lot of impact with lot of heat waves in different parts of the world. And now if the saltiness of the water is also affected, I do not know where we are going. We are going into somewhere which where the it will not be easy to handle these situations. So I end my discussion here. So if you have any doubts and any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section. And if you like my videos, please feel free to share and subscribe it. And please do let me know if you are finding these videos helpful, because then it gives me more particular direction where I can make the videos. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.